Hello everyone. Anyone forced to live far from home hopes for a better future for themselves and their family. But sometimes, what awaits them in that promised land is a brutal truth about money and about human nature. In mid-May 2021, the Vietnamese community in Taipei was shaken by news that a Vietnamese massage worker had died at home with dozens of deep wounds across her body. The room where her body was found was stained red with blood, with splatters even reaching the ceiling. The case not only raised fears about the safety of women living alone, but also left society wrestling with the realities of immigration and illegal employment. So who was really behind this tragedy? What drove the woman to such a heartbreaking end? Stay with Vietnamese Case Files until the very end as we unravel the questions surrounding this unsettling case. We'd also like to note that all content in today's video has been researched and compiled by our team from multiple sources. If there are any errors or details that need correction, please leave a comment below so we can update and revise accordingly. Before we get into the details, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications right now so you won't miss other gripping cases on Vietnamese Case Files. Thank you for being with us. At 9 a.m. on May 12, 2021, Taipei police suddenly received a report from a middle-aged man. On the other end of the line, he sounded panicked and rushed. He told police that his lover, a Vietnamese woman around 40 years old, surnamed Lee, who lived in an apartment on the 6th floor of a building on Linh Sen North Road in Zhongshan District, had run into trouble. Earlier, he had been unable to reach her by phone. Sensing that something was wrong, he went to check on her in person only to discover in horror that Miss Lee was dead on the bathroom tile floor, with a deep wound on her neck caused by a sharp object. Unable to believe what he was seeing, the man reeled and fell backward. A moment later, he regained his composure and immediately shouted for nearby neighbors to call an ambulance, while he reported the case to the police. After receiving the call, authorities were quickly dispatched to the scene. The entrance to the 6th floor of the 12-story building became sealed off and eerily quiet as police cordoned off the area. Investigators noted that Miss Lee's small apartment unit Salaf looked much like the other units along the same corridor. An ordinary wooden door with a bedroom and a separate bathroom inside. However, the metallic stench of blood hit them the moment they stepped through the doorway, and the closer they got to the bathroom, the more overwhelming it became, signaling a deeply tragic death. Inside, the investigative team found Miss Lee's body lying face up on the tile floor, already stiff, surrounded by a pool of blood. The victim had a long, deep wound on her neck up to 20 centimeters, nearly severing the carotid artery. This also explained why there was so much blood. And it didn't end there. The victim had also suffered dozens of other wounds across her body, mainly concentrated on her chest and arms. Fresh blood was splattered throughout the room, with stains reaching all the way up to the ceiling above the bathtub, evidence of the killer's cold-blooded brutality. Police also noticed one detail. The blood traces on the floor were fainter and more diluted than those on the ceiling and surrounding walls, signs that he had likely tried to use water to wipe the floor clean. Based on those details, police quickly concluded that the killer acted with extreme brutality, yet also in a hurry, leaving bloodstained traces everywhere. The investigative team therefore hoped the perpetrator would slip up and leave behind fingerprints or some form of DNA. In addition, there were no signs of forced entry on the outer door, and nearby residents reported no unusual sounds of a break-in. For that reason, police suspected this was a targeted attack, and that the perpetrator must have been someone the victim knew close enough and trusted enough to be invited inside while she was alone. Following that investigative direction, Taipei police understood that the top priority was to confirm the victim's identity and map out her circle of relationships. Only then could they narrow down suspects and tighten the scope of the investigation. Since the person who reported the case was an acquaintance, police did not take long to trace leads about the deceased. The victim, surnamed Lee, was Vietnamese. However, due to the sensitive nature of the case, both the media and the police did not disclose her full name. Notably, police also found that the victim's immigration and travel records were far from transparent. Miss Lee had previously come to Taiwan as a manual laborer around 2015, but by 2018 she had fled her workplace and was deported back to Vietnam. Then, about 1 year before the murder, she returned to Taiwan through illegal immigration channels and rented the apartment on Linh Sen North Road. There, Miss Lee operated a private massage business inside the apartment. In reality, it followed a one downstairs, one upstairs model, a term commonly used in Taiwan to refer to sexual services disguised as massage. This work, along with Miss Lee's status, was entirely illegal, so she typically served only regular customers. She could not advertise or put up a sign. Clients came through word of mouth and quietly visited the apartment. And naturally, most of her customers were men. Miss Lee was also described as introverted and detached, living a closed-off life and never having conflicts with others, partly due to her personality, and partly because she was residing illegally and therefore avoided contact with authorities. Before the murder, Miss Lee had arranged to go to a temple with her lover on the morning of May 12th. But when her boyfriend arrived that morning, he found only her cold, blood-covered body in the bathroom. Even though the deceased's status and line of work were hardly something to be proud of, the heartbreaking incident still left the Vietnamese community in Taipei deeply shaken. This was also a case that, if handled poorly, could spark public anxiety about immigration issues, so the police had to be both cautious and urgent in turning over every clue in the investigation. First, Taipei's criminal police worked with the Criminal Investigation Division to swiftly photograph, measure, and collect evidence at the scene. The initial examination report showed that the victim had suffered more than 20 severe wounds, 17 of which were concentrated around the neck. This indicated the killer's strong intent to take the victim's life. The forensic autopsy confirmed that Miss Lee died from acute blood loss. Police also recorded multiple unfamiliar fingerprints on the doorknob and the bathroom sink. To seize every chance of solving the case, they collected all of these traces and also used swabs to gather every possible DNA sample from the bloodstains on the floor, bringing everything back to the lab for analysis. In addition, with help from the victim's lover, police discovered that Miss Lee's phone, handbag, and some of her jewelry had been taken. With that, the signs of a robbery that escalated into murder became clear. After attacking the victim, the killer rummaged through her belongings, grabbed her handbag, and hurriedly fled. But who would target the property of an illegal immigrant service worker like Miss Lee? To answer that question, another investigative team was assigned to review security camera footage from the building and surrounding areas. From the video they obtained, they noticed an unknown man entering Miss Lee's apartment at around 8 p.m. the previous evening. He stayed for nearly 1 hour before leaving. After that, no one else entered or exited the apartment until her boyfriend arrived. The man who left appeared to be middle-aged, wearing a cap and a light-colored top. Based on the fingerprint evidence and the video, police quickly narrowed in on a suspect. A regular customer who had previously visited Miss Lee's massage business. This hypothesis became even stronger when detectives, using the victim's phone number, uncovered a contact history between Miss Lee and a suspicious man. The two had known each other for a long time. Even shortly before the murder, they were still in frequent contact, exchanging flirtatious, suggestive messages. This lead also helped police reinforce their initial reasoning. The killer was someone Miss Lee knew, not a random thug. By this point, the evidence had been fully assembled, and police were confident in identifying the main suspect as Pan Bing-siu, a Taiwanese national born in 1984 who worked as a food delivery driver, what we commonly call a shipper in Taipei. According to records, Pan was divorced, had 2 young daughters, and lived with his elderly mother. More importantly, he had a prior record related to controlled substances. However, on his personal page, Pan Bing-siu frequently posted photos proudly featuring his ex-wife and family as if there had never been a separation. In reality, he was financially desperate. His monthly income was only around 40 to 50,000 new Taiwan dollars, while he was heavily addicted to entertainment services. Because of that, he had also burned through a considerable amount of money on Miss Lee. On May 12th, just a few hours after the victim's body was discovered, police launched a manhunt for Pan Bing-siu. They found that he was still at his home in Tundian District, New Taipei City. That same evening, officers moved in quickly and arrested him. At first, Pan Bing-siu reflexively denied all accusations. He claimed that at the time the victim was harmed, he had merely been delivering food to that area by coincidence. But police quickly pointed out that delivery data from the night of May 11th showed no orders anywhere near Miss Lee's location. He then claimed it was an attack carried out in a fit of anger, saying Miss Lee had slapped him twice. That excuse didn't hold up for long either, because Miss Lee was running a service business and, under normal circumstances, would be expected to cater to customers hardly the type to swing a hand across a client's face. In the end, as each piece of evidence was presented for confrontation, including CCTV images, fingerprints, and phone data, Pan Bing-siu had no choice but to bow his head and confess, admitting everything he had done. According to the suspect, because he was short on money, he developed a dark plan. His target was none other than Miss Lee. After using her services many times, he knew she lived alone, with no acquaintances in Taiwan. Moreover, because she was an illegal immigrant, he believed that even if she were attacked, she would not dare report it to the police. Putting the plan into action, on May 11th, he bought a kitchen knife normally used for peeling fruit and then went to meet Miss Lee. When he arrived at the apartment, Pan Bing-siu was warmly welcomed because it was an arranged meeting between the two of them. And since he was a regular customer, Miss Lee was not on guard at all. At first, the two talked normally and even ate noodles together cheerfully, and they were physically intimate as well. But Pan Bing-siu did not forget his main purpose for coming. Taking advantage of a moment when Miss Lee was not paying attention, he turned to rummage through her wallet. Miss Lee noticed. Furious, she swung her hand and slapped him in the face twice, sending him into an uncontrollable rage. Immediately afterward, Pan Bing-siu used the knife he had brought and attacked Miss Lee with more than 20 fatal strikes. After committing the crime, Pan Bing-siu picked up the victim's handbag, which contained 3,500 new Taiwan dollars and a gold necklace, then got on his motorbike and fled. On the way back, Pan Bing-siu threw the murder weapon into a roadside trash bin along Roosevelt Road. Soon after, police went to the spot he indicated and recovered the knife. After examining the bloodstains and matching them with the victim's wounds, forensic investigators confirmed that this was the weapon used to kill Miss Lee. Notably, even after committing such a horrific crime, Pan Bing-siu was still able to remain calm and continue his food delivery work as usual the next morning. On May 12th, Pan was making a delivery when he sideswiped a car in the Tundian area, scraping both of his arms. However, he stated that he would compensate the car owner later and quickly left the scene without notifying the police. During questioning, Pan Bing-siu consistently appeared indifferent. When pressed about his motive, he lowered his head in silence, and in the end only admitted that he had tried to attack the victim to rob her after being discovered. However, investigators believe this was a calculated murder, not merely an impulsive act in a moment of desperation. After all, Pan Bing-siu had come prepared with a knife and had been watching Miss Lee since the previous night. Although the suspect's statement still contained many unclear points, especially regarding motive, police could only infer that he may not have intended to kill the victim from the outset. Driven by debt and living expenses, he likely planned to stage a meeting and then steal money. The reason he chose Miss Lee was also easy to understand. Her work and immigration status were illegal in Taipei, so even if she were stolen from, she would not dare call the police. Carrying a weapon was merely a plan B, meaning if the theft failed, he would switch to threats and robbery. But while he was searching through her belongings, Pan Bing-siu was discovered by the victim and physically confronted as a warning, which made him explode in fury and become determined to kill her to silence her completely. From here, the pieces of the overall picture were almost complete. Taipei police successfully reconstructed the entire sequence of events. On the night of May 11th, 2021, Pan Bing-siu made thorough preparations before meeting Miss Lee. A few hours earlier, he had stopped by a convenience store to buy a fruit-cutting knife. At around 8 p.m., Pan Bing-siu finished a food delivery by motorbike and then went to Miss Lee's apartment on Linsen North Road. The two had arranged to meet. Pan Bing-siu pretended that he only wanted to eat noodles and talk, asking for nothing more in order to conceal his real intent. Miss Lee trusted him and opened the door, letting Pan Bing-siu into the bedroom. They started talking and then moved into the bathroom area to use the additional services. During that time, Pan Bing-siu approached a corner table and secretly took Miss Lee's wallet to check how much money was inside. Miss Lee noticed and slapped Pan Bing-siu in the face twice, causing him to lose control in anger. He immediately pulled out the knife he had prepared. After a frenzied assault, Miss Lee collapsed, unconscious, and ultimately died in a large pool of blood. Pan Bing-siu then remained calm and continued searching the room. He took the wallet, the mobile phone, and even the gold bracelet from the victim's wrist. At around 9 p.m., Pan Bing-siu left the apartment on his motorbike, calm and unhurried. He pulled over along nearby Roosevelt Road to dispose of the weapon. After that, he went home to shower, clean the blood off his hands and clothes, and then continued delivering food as if nothing had happened. But that composure could not conceal his guilt. In the end, he was caught and brought to justice in less than 24 hours after the crime. The case of the Vietnamese woman who was attacked in her apartment was quickly transferred to the Taipei District Prosecutor's Office for indictment on charges of homicide committed in the course of robbery. In June 2022, the Taipei District Court opened the first instance trial. At the hearing, prosecutors presented the full body of evidence, including the perpetrator's confession, crime scene photos, forensic examination results, security camera footage, the receipt for purchasing the knife, and photos documenting the victim's injuries. The forensic unit also disclosed in detail that the wound on the victim's neck was as deep as 20 centimeters and that the artery had nearly been severed, demonstrating the extreme savagery of the killer. Pan Bing-siu's defense argued that he was attacked first by the victim and therefore lost control, while also deliberately suggesting a theory that Pan Bing-siu had lost awareness due to mental illness. His lawyer even requested a psychiatric evaluation to determine whether Pan Bing-siu suffered from intermittent loss of control. However, the judge did not accept these unreasonable appeals. In July 2022, the Taipei District Court issued a firm ruling. The defendant confessed to all charges, yet his attitude during questioning was not sincere. The act was exceptionally cruel and premeditated, carried out with disregard for the fatal consequence. Although the defendant claims he was physically provoked first, in fact, he had prepared the weapon and had time to commit the crime, indicating prior intent. Therefore, the court sentenced Pan Bing-siu to life imprisonment and deprived him of civil rights for life. Pan Bing-siu did not accept the verdict and immediately appealed to the Taiwan High Court. However, at the appellate hearing, all evidence was upheld. In February 2023, the High Court in Taipei upheld the first instance judgment and again sentenced Pan to life imprisonment. The defendant appealed once more, seeking to bring the case to the Supreme Court. The final hearing took place in September 2023. The Supreme Court's decision on September 21, 2023 affirmed all prior rulings and rejected Pan's appeal. As a result, the life sentence was finalized, and Pan Bing-siu ultimately had to spend the rest of his life in prison with no further chance of freedom. The case file concluded with the harshest sentence available under Taiwan's current criminal code. This horrific case sent shockwaves through Taiwanese public opinion regarding the safety of migrant workers, especially those who are undocumented, like Miss Lee. The crime scene was on Linsen North Road in Zhongshan District, an area that mixes offices and hotels with many adult entertainment venues. For that reason, it has become known as a professional red light district within Taiwan, drawing large numbers of male customers seeking nighttime entertainment. And among the thousands of workers serving in the area, not a few come from Vietnam. In fact, according to figures released in early 2022, nearly 20,000 Vietnamese workers came to Taiwan in 2021 alone, the highest number among all labor exporting countries. Most Vietnamese workers in Taiwan are women, taking jobs in healthcare, domestic work, or even working under the table in illegal sectors such as the red light trade. However, because of language barriers and because many are undocumented migrants, they often fear contact with authorities. As a result, their rights and protective safeguards remain uncertain and unresolved. In that context, the perpetrator exploited the situation to harm the victim before anyone could react. And although very little private information about the victim was ever made public, the case is still remembered as a heartbreaking lesson. Migrant workers also deserve society's protection and vigilance, even with people you know is never unnecessary. What thoughts does this tragic case leave you with? Let Vietnamese Case Files know in the comments. And if you found today's story compelling, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Vietnamese Case Files so you can keep following more gripping stories in the future. Goodbye and see you next time.